And who invited Win Arias? I mean, right away my status was diminished the minute I took a look at Win. Anyway, memory is a precious commodity that I share with fewer and fewer people every year, but this gathering of people, this room, really does bring it all back. We're going to keep on a very short string, get our speeches done quickly, but it is a very emotional environment to be here. Being in this room surrounded by portraits that mean a lot to some people and less to other people, but the history of nutrition really is also connected to this room, and I like to share just a couple of the recollections that we had. The first time that the word nutrition meant nothing at Tufts until 1976. The word did not appear in any Tufts publications. It's hard to believe. The first 130, 40 years of this university, nutrition was a complete cipher. Nobody knew what it was, nobody paid any attention to it, and yet the founding of nutrition, the history, is in this room because it was first proposed to the Faculty of Arts and Sciences as a department, and then it was approved as an institute, and then the trustees got involved, and it became a school. But all of it started, really, from the thoughts and ideas from that one little man up there, the little Frenchman, Jean Mayer, who came to this university in 1976 and had an agenda. He was a president with an agenda, something he wanted to do, and he was going to not stop until it happened to get done. But for our context today, we're going to talk about BI and AI. They mean something to a lot of different people, but for me, BI does not mean the hospital, it means before IRV. And AI will mean after IRV. And so this is the context that we have. Before IRV, when the HNRC was established and set up by an act really of Congress, the Human Nutrition Research Center was established downtown. We gave them the gift of land. The building started going up, and the USDA wanted nothing to do with it. We were at war, and the BI period before IRV was a period of consummate warfare. It was a period of anger. We had warfare with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We had warfare with the medical school that wanted to have nothing to do with nutrition. The chairman of the Department of Molecular Biology looked up at the building that was going up and said, as far as I'm concerned, that building might as well be on the planet Krypton. I don't care about it. He learned later on what was important for him, but it took a while to get it all happen. The cooperative agreement that we had with the Department of Agriculture was bigger than a large bookshelf. It must have gone to thousands of pages. They wanted every little detail spelled out. If a Tufts faculty member or student set foot inappropriately in that building, somebody would pick up the phone from Beltsville, from Anthrax Highway or Pesticide Road and complain. Get them out of that room. They don't belong there. It's not a Tufts facility. So it was warfare, literally, and trying to keep any peace in the ground was difficult. Medical school was furious because the money that they thought they were going to get, they weren't going to get, and it was a tough period. I happened to come on as administrator in 1981. I was very lucky that two great scientists came downtown at that time, Jeff and Rob. Jeff Blumberg and Rob Russell showed up in 1981, brought a little bit of stability, but the people who were running the place still took their orders from Jean and Washington and congressional appropriations. The AI period, the after IRV, it was not until 1986 IRV came and brought some kind of stability, some kind of peace in the house, some kind of order. The bookshelf-long agreement that we had with the USDA turned into a page-and-a-half cooperative agreement. Everybody calmed down. Maybe he talked so much he just bored them. But whatever happened, everybody calmed down, and IRV brought peace to the community and peace to the campus. He also, because he was such an eminent medical physician, he had the magic letters after his name, MD, and Jean didn't. He called himself Dr. Jean Mayer, but he was a PhD. Stanley was a PhD. Hamish was an MD, but he was a troublemaker, so he didn't count. But Irv brought the right style that we needed, and peace came to the house. He set the tone, and we followed the tone. And so I wanted to just say thank you on behalf of Jean Mayer, Stanley Gershoff, Hamish Monroe, for all that you've done for this institution and for the art of nutrition that has become the hallmark of this university. It could also not have happened without the trustees. They had to be the riverboat gamblers who put their money on this little Frenchman that nobody really wanted as president of this university, but they went along with it, and nobody was as important in making it all happen as Bill Meserve. Next, please.
Thank you, Dr. Gittleman. It's hard to believe that Saul and I were once teammates of the same softball team. It's funny, I became acquainted with Irv before I actually knew him. And let me explain. I was a trustee in the 1980s, continued after that. And one of my assignments was on the Academic Affairs Committee. In those days, I'm not sure it's the practice today, the Academic Affairs Committee would meet late in the afternoon for a couple of hours, have dinner, and then resume until our business was over. Jean Mayer was always an attendee at those meetings, and because Jean and I actually became very good friends over the years and talked an awful lot more, I think, than most administrators and trustees knew about Tufts. We frequently ended up sitting together at dinner. And I can distinctly remember a dinner in the mid-1980s where he said, Bill, he said, I'm involved in trying to recruit this superstar from the University of Chicago. He said, if we get him, he said, this is really going to stabilize nutrition and at Tufts and make us, stabilize us as the leading research and education institute for nutrition in the United States, if not in the world. That person was Irv Rosenberg, and he said that it was going to touch and go as to whether he was going to be successful. To our great good fortune, Irv accepted the offer and came here and headed up the Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging, its full title. And I met him, I think, once or twice after that. But I really didn't get to know Irv better until he became Dean of the Nutrition School in the 1990s. During that time, I was chair of the Trustees Administration and Finance Committee for 5 or 6 years. And again, back then we had a process where in February we would review the budgets of every school of the university. We would schedule meetings all day on Saturday, allocate 45 minutes to an hour per school and for the central administration. And we would get a big notebook beforehand with the budget and the plans for the schools. Although a lot of the trustees felt very burdened by this, I think, I really valued it because it gave me a good sense of where these schools were headed, what their plans were, what their budgets were, what their concerns were. But more importantly, it was an opportunity to assess the leaders of the various schools of the university. So I could actually hear each of the deans talk about what his or her ambitions were for that particular school, question them, joke with them on occasion, but most of it was very, very serious. And I can remember the School of Nutrition, frankly, was a piece of cake with Irv at the helm. He would come in with a budget that was responsible, that was balanced. He would have a plan that had clear goals, that was aspirational, and yet I knew, based on experience, that he would not overpromise and undercommit, that what he sought to achieve would actually be achieved, and in fact, that invariably happened. Irv said that we ought to talk a little bit about some of the wars. I'm not sure that we had any particular wars between the school and the university. As Saul has said, There were wars between the university and the Department of Agriculture, particularly in the early years, but a lot of that was smoothed over thanks to Irv. And I enormously enjoyed my association with Irv, with his professionalism and his competence and his concern about research and education, and particularly about the students in the nutrition school, whether they would be able to afford the tuition and so on, and we would have serious discussions about that. Fast forward a few years, when I finally stepped down as an active trustee because of term limits, I was approached and asked whether I would be interested in continuing to serve as on the external advisory board for the EPIC program, the Education for Public Inquiry and International Citizenship here at Tufts. At the time, there were only 3 members of the external board. It was a limited program, but within a few years, it was transformed into the Institute for Global Leadership with many more programs, and we built a board which at its high point probably had nearly 40 people. And Irv, whose daughter had been one of the early students in the EPIC program when she was an undergraduate at Tufts, became a member of that board. Irv was as reliable a board member as you could ask for. He always asked good questions. He participated regularly. He was very supportive, very loyal, and I enjoyed, or have enjoyed immensely, our association there. He has been truly a great citizen for Tufts. Irv embodies, in my mind, many of the best attributes of anyone who's been at Tufts. He was very concerned with research and an eminent researcher. He was concerned about teaching, was a good teacher, and was very concerned about his students, the students in the school, what they were doing, whether they were going to be able to afford it, as the debt that they would accumulate as they went off, in many cases, poorly paying positions with NGOs. And he was also very much committed to community service, and the Tufts community is evidenced in part by his participation in the IGL. I think Jean Mayer was absolutely correct back in the 1980s when he said if we could recruit Irv, this is really going to stabilize and establish Tufts as the center for nutrition, research, and education in the United States and the world. Irv has done that completely, and I think Jean would be enormously pleased that the Jean Mayer Professor in Nutrition, that chair was occupied by Irv Rosenberg. Jean had been as excited about this appointment as any that I can remember during his tenure as president, and Irv has fulfilled that and more. So Irv, I would like to thank you very much for all your contributions to Tufts over the years, and I think that I expect you to continue to be involved in the community. This is not the end of your Tufts Association by any means, and congratulations and thank you.